Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's installment in our COVID response webinar series. My name is Meredith Medlin, and I'm glad to have you with us today. It goes without saying that this coronavirus pandemic has drastically changed our way of life, and while everyone's first concern is, of course, their health and the health of their families, Accion, Opportunity Fund, and Trust Plus are partner organizations that are also focused on supporting you and your finances as you weather this storm and recover. Over the next several weeks, we'll be hosting a series of webinars like this one to provide you with valuable information to support your recovery. We're here to help you. Today's webinar will address key skills and practices to help you manage the cash that you have on hand during this emergency. We're very lucky to have Sarah Wynn and Chris Starr from Trust Plus with us today to share their expertise in cash management, and we're grateful to Sarah and Chris for giving us their time today. Before we begin though, I just want to quickly go over a few logistical items on how we use the Zoom webinar tool today. First, you should be able to see the presentation through the Zoom webinar tools window on your desktop if you've joined us by computer. In that window, on the black toolbar, you will see a chat button. Please click on that chat button and use that function to type in any questions you have throughout the presentation. We will be pausing to take questions at certain spots through the presentation based on what is typed into that chat box. So feel free to type away. We want to know what you want to know. We will be recording this webinar today so that you can refer back to the information presented at a later time. I'll send an email with that link to the recording shortly after the webinar concludes this afternoon. And that wraps up all of my logistical announcements. So I am pleased to hand things over to Sarah and Chris.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. A few quick notes. We're going to be doing a Q&A for each concept, time allowing, so questions will be received through that chat feature. And there is a lot of information out there, so please remember that after today's webinar, you can follow up with a Trust Plus coach. And so you may be wondering, who is Trust Plus? We are expert financial coaching, an easy-to-use web app, including tools for budgeting, credit report review, and FICO scores. Personalized action plans. We are 100% confidential, 24-hour, 7 days a week, lifetime access to you at no cost, and this is lifetime. And we are a nonprofit social enterprise. That means we're unbiased and entirely motivated by your success. And I do want to pull out that our service approach during COVID-19 is going to be a bit different. We're going to be active problem solving with our clients for the immediate and the midterm. So think 3 to 4 months from now when grace periods start to expire. And we're going to be really focusing on documenting the impact, especially as the turbulence of what services and options are provided for people. We want to document the way that coronavirus has disrupted your income for future claims. And so you may be wondering, who is that voice? I am Sarah Wen. I'm a financial coach. I've been with Trust Plus for about 3.5 years. My favorite food is chicken noodle soup, and I'm making it this weekend. It's getting me through my social isolation. I taught high school Spanish before I was a financial coach, and I have a cat named Fable who is home with me right now. So if you hear any meows in the background or any growls, that's Fable, and I do apologize. So let's talk about the agenda for today. We got to know me, we got to know Trust Plus. We're gonna go over 2 assessments about income and expenses, starting with expenses. And then we're gonna talk about making a plan, and we'll have lots of Q&A sprinkled in there. Let's jump in. So there are 3 things that we're going to be focused on with assessing expenses: prioritizing them, reducing what you pay, and obtaining hardship accommodation on select debts. Let's start with prioritization of expenses. Start thinking 2 to 3 months. Take an internal assessment of what might be happening with you and your income and your family's income. And I have to call this out, y'all. This pandemic is unprecedented. It's likely to last several more months. It's ever evolving. Things are coming up in our landscape, and resources are being offered, and then they're no longer offered. So let's try our best to think ahead, but know that Trust Plus financial coaches are available to you after today. So the first thing we're going to be doing with our expenses is that we're thinking about its flexibility, liquidity, and necessity. When we're thinking about flexibility, is there a grace period? Is there lender leniency? Is negotiation possible? I'm really happy to say that my clients, as well as a personal testimony, that lenders are reaching out and saying, hey, call us. We want to work with you to get us through this. Let's be flexible. Does it require a cash payment or can it go on available credit card? Just the other day, I was talking with a client about liquidity, and instead of paying their car insurance premium with cash, they decided to use their credit card because that was the right move for them. And think about necessity. Evaluate any subscription services or anything that just doesn't feel right in this moment that can be cut out. And so when we think about, we were focused on fixed expenses. Let's think about those things that change month to month. Where can expenses be trimmed? Where have expenses increased? And what barriers might exist to trimming them? I know that a lot of my self-care expenses have trimmed. I like that play on words, like haircuts and anything of that nature. But my expenses with groceries has increased astronomically. I'm eating. And I was thinking about my mom when I was thinking about the barriers that might exist to trimming them. My mom does need to trim a garbage bill, but she has to go in person. So that is something that we're grappling with as a family. And so when we think about prioritization, start asking yourself what expenses feel the most vulnerable or even stress you out the most. Like if one thing falls through, then this bill and that bill are soon to follow. And also, just like how I called out on the previous page, are things being needed to be paid in person? What adjustments might be necessary now? And as we're thinking about our expense priorities, let's think about this broadly with food and medical care as your top priorities, first and foremost. Then comes utilities, communications, and housing. There's a lot of provisions happening on the state, local, and federal level to help us get through this, but food and medical care always come first. And then debts and other responsibilities, we'll take care of that later. I want to call out that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has got a great tool on its website, CFPB, you might hear it as short, has this great tool that I even use and some of my clients are using to really set forth what is most important for them. So definitely check that out after today. Cool, let's talk about reducing what you pay. So first and foremost, food, number one, understand whether you qualify for food assistance via SNAP and check for any local food banks or similar programs. Then let's talk about housing. There's some opportunities to communicate with your landlord to see if, or your mortgage payment or mortgage company to see if anything can be deferred or lowered. But let me call out this. For mortgages, relief will look different if you have a federally backed mortgage. The first thing that I want you to know is that servicers may not charge any fees, penalties, or interest beyond the amounts the borrower would have paid if all payments had been made on schedule. Second, borrowers through the CARES Act do not have to provide any proof of financial hardship to receive forbearance. This is in stark contrast to industry practice during ordinary times when lenders and loan servicers generally grant forbearance only at their own discretion and typically require borrowers to prove they need to postpone payments because of serious financial hardship. And third, this is really key. Your decision to seek forbearance can't be reported to credit agencies as non-payment. Not being able to pay your mortgage during the coronavirus pandemic is not a reflection of your credit worthiness. And there's a couple of drawbacks that I do want to make clear is that you'll eventually have to make up for the missed payments, and repayment terms probably won't be entirely without cost. Despite the prohibition on extra fees and charges during forbearance, the law is silent on the discussion and question of when and how borrowers will bring their accounts current after their forbearance period is over. I've heard that some banks have been reportedly telling my clients that relief seeker and that are relief seekers that their payments will be due in a lump sum after 3 months. But then I've also heard that some may be able to move the extra payments to the back of the loan, like extending the term of the loan for like 3 extra months, or make up for the payments via smaller extra payments over the following months. But just some things to keep top of mind. So let's think about our expenses and think about utilities in particular. I want you to really set some high priority in thinking utilities as part of housing. And I want you to think about internet and cell phone service as necessary utilities because access to information is very important right now. So the first thing is reach out to your cell phone provider to ask how they can reduce your monthly bill. And make sure you know those policies for suspension of services. I'm going to call out another website that is super helpful. It's called findhelp.org, and you can just enter your zip code and navigate to help paying for housing, and then to help paying for internet or phone services, or phone for a list of internet and cell phone opportunities in your area. Verizon just gave out 16 gigabytes of data for no charge, so it's worth a check. And then I want you to do the similar steps to for utilities. So think energy, water, sewer, trash removal. Go to findhelp.org, enter your zip code, and see what's out there. And then reach out, ask for more affordable plans, downsize the package, see if they offer free access. Yes, absolutely, especially if you have students at home. And I have to say, I am super positive in this moment because both utility companies and telecommunication utilities are making statements about supporting its customers. So that's really cool. Let's talk about obtaining hardship accommodation on select debts. So many major credit card and lending companies are making public statements in support of those who are suffering, while I have to say, my team of coaches and myself are seeing that some frontline staff seem resistant to offering some help. So Trust Plus has been dealing with these companies for, I don't know, 23 years, however long we've been around, maybe 25 at this point, 21. Oh, I should have had that, but sorry, y'all. Our coaches have had a lot of success getting hardship help for our clients. And so asking for hardship department phone numbers if the request cannot be resolved is really important. Keeping a log with dates, times, names of the reps you speak with to draft a letter if that is necessary. And organize before you make the call. And for those of you with private student loan debts, forbearance is still an option, though interest will occur. Requesting new payment terms or refinancing with another carrier is also an option. And here's some great news. Federal student loans do not need to take any action to suspend payments. Your federal loan servicer will suspend all payments for you without further action. I'm going to skip this slide because we're going to talk about that in a moment, but we talked about prioritizing expenses, reducing what you pay, obtaining a hardship accommodation on select debts. What kind of questions are coming up for you all?
All right, thanks, Sarah. So folks, anybody have a question around assessing expenses or deciding how to make some of these changes to your expenses, please type those into the chat box and I will read them aloud to the group so that we can have a little bit of a discussion here. Sarah, I can get us started. Actually, I have a question for you.
Right.
So when you're thinking specifically about trying to reduce some of the debt burden on those monthly payments, would you suggest that folks have a conversation with the creditor? So whether it's with your bank or your mortgage holder or whoever is the creditor, ask some questions and do some fact finding before formally applying for that forbearance or for that debt relief?
Yeah, and I do want to say that we'll be available to help with that because there are so many moving parts. And we have to remember that the frontline staff are going through this as well. And so we have to lend some empathy, and we'll have to do our due diligence to make sure we're gathering all the proper pieces of information and making sure we're following the right steps, because if there was an error or something doesn't happen quite the way that we want it to happen, we'll want to make sure that we have that information as well as that documentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like documentation and keeping organized records is the name of the game here. And luckily we have more time because we're not going out anywhere, so we can get ourselves organized.
That is true. That is true.
All right, great. Well, it looks like we might be ready to go ahead to the next section, and we'll pause for Q&A again in a little bit.
Awesome. Let's jump right into assessing income.
Great.
Okay, y'all. So the 4 pieces that we're going to talk about is evaluating your assets, the economic impact payments that are coming to you, SBA options, and unemployment access. So let's talk about evaluating your assets first. So we're thinking about all income and all available liquid assets. So income for yourself and other household contributors. What money is coming in now, what you anticipate for the next few pay cycles, as well as for the long term. Next, let's talk about savings availability. How much savings do you currently have? What upcoming needs, contingencies might be relying on that savings fund? I can give a personal testimony that I have a savings account earmarked for tax payments, but because of this crisis, I've had to really kind of rearrange things and reevaluate my plan. And then ask yourself, are you in a position that you can add to the savings fund right now? Then take a look at the availability that's on your credit cards. Adding to your debt right now is an absolute last resort, but food and housing must come first. And like I shared before, I've had clients that have had to make some payments using their credit cards, and there's no shame in that right now. So let's talk about economic impact payments. So we've heard a lot about this. Most adults will get $1,200, although some might get less, and for every qualifying child under 16, the payment will be an additional $500. So let me call this really important information out, because there's a lot of movement on this right now. For those who have not yet filed their return for 2019, the IRS will use information from their 2018 tax filing to calculate the payment. The economic impact payment will be deposited directly into the same banking account reflected on the return filed. The IRS urges anyone with a tax filing obligation who have not yet filed a tax return for 2018 or 2019 to file as soon as they can to receive an economic impact payment. Taxpayers should include direct deposit banking information on that return. For those who are a little bit concerned, well, not a little bit, a lot of bit concerned about visiting a tax professional or local community organization in person to get help with a tax return like at a VITA site, these economic impact payments will be available throughout the rest of 2020. So the deadlines to file and pay federal taxes are extended to July 15th, 2020. All really great news. Okay, so here's a really great visual of what to expect in your stimulus check. And so if the IRS does not have direct deposit information for you, please check the irs.gov's coronavirus page today. They worked with the Treasury to develop a web-based portal for individuals to provide their banking information to the IRS online, because we don't want you to wait to receive your payments. We want you to get them immediately, and direct deposit will be quicker than checks in the mail. And if you have debts regarding child support, your payment might be affected. So here's some call to action for folks. If you have a tax filing obligation for 2018 to 2019, we're going to want to take action on that, and your financial coach, if you sign up, can definitely help you with that, making a plan and whatnot. And here's another tricky thing. If you are not required to file an allowable reason, like your Social Security recipient, but you do have dependents, you will want to file in order to receive those funds on behalf of your dependents. Okay, let's talk about the SBA options. Really great stuff. So let's talk about the Paycheck Protection Program. You can apply through any existing SBA 7A lender or through any federally insured depository institution. And other regulated lenders might be able to, or will be available to make these loans once they are approved and enrolled in the program. So you should definitely consult with your lender as to whether it is participating in the program. And lenders began to process applications on April 3rd. So this will also be available until June 30th, 2020. And who can apply? This is any small business that meets SBA size standards, as well as any business 501(c) that has 500 employees or that meets the SBA industry size standard if more than 500. Any business with an NAICS code that begins with 72 that has more than one physical location and employs less than 500 per location. Any sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed persons. No collateral or personal guarantees are required. Neither the government nor lenders will charge small businesses any fees. And forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. Forgiveness will be reduced if full-time headcount declines or if salaries and wages decrease. And this loan has a maturity of 2 years and an interest rate of 1%. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan provides economic support to small businesses to overcome the temporary loss of revenue that they are experiencing as a result of this awful pandemic. And here's something cool. The advance funds will be made available within days of a successful application, and this loan advance will not have to be repaid. So that's pretty cool. And finally, one that's pretty interesting is the SBA Express Bridge loan, and this can be used to, it can be a term loan or a bridge, the gap type thing while applying for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. It's a fast turnaround. You have to have a relationship with an SBA Express lender, and it does have to be repaid in full or in part by proceeds from the EIDL loan. And it's up to $25,000. And the SBA is doing its part. They are automatically paying the principal, interest, and fees of current 7A, 504, and microloans for a period of 6 months. And the SBA will also automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of new 7A, 504, and microloans issued prior to September 27th, 2020. So quickly, let's talk about unemployment. We're really going to be focused on you are going to want to start by visiting your state's labor department or the equivalent website. If you are not traditionally eligible for unemployment benefits, begin the standard unemployment insurance application process and apply for pandemic unemployment assistance. This is really cool. But I do have to say, we have heard a lot of our clients call hundreds of times before getting a call through. So use those online tools if you can. You qualify for pandemic unemployment if you've been diagnosed with COVID-19 or have symptoms or seeking diagnosis, a member of your household has been diagnosed with COVID-19, you're providing care for someone diagnosed, you're providing child care or care of someone in the household who can't attend school or work because it is closed due to the pandemic, you're quarantined and have been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, you were scheduled to start employment and do not have a job and cannot reach your place of employment as a result of COVID-19 outbreak, you've become the breadwinner for a household because the head of household has died as a direct result of COVID-19, you've had to quit your job as a direct result of COVID-19, or your place of employment is closed as a direct result of COVID-19. And the benefits for this, the pandemic unemployment assistance program runs from January 27th, 2020 through December 31st, and these can be received retroactively for qualifying applicants. And a really important call out is that that this has been extended from 26 weeks to 39 weeks. So huge, huge, huge extension. I just want to back it up. So if you are a self-employed worker or do not qualify for regular state unemployment insurance, you may be eligible for federal pandemic unemployment assistance. Cool. All right. So a real quick, yep, go ahead. Let's do questions.
All right, we got a few more questions this time around how we kind of start these conversations or figure out where to get the best answers. So some of these we might refer folks back to another resource, but just in case, if you happen to know the answers to a couple of these here. So with talking about assessing the assets available, when you were speaking about credit cards, whether you're putting existing expenses on a credit card that maybe doesn't have a large balance or something like that, what would you say to somebody who is considering opening a credit card right now? Maybe if they don't have one or they are looking at needing a little bit more credit, what circumstances would make that a good idea for somebody?
I think the first thing that I want to share is that it's not going to be one size fits all through this pandemic. Your financial needs are very unique compared to, say, a neighbor or whomever. I would say as long, I want you to examine what's really stressing you out. And if obtaining a credit card at this time is going to alleviate some of that stress, I'm going to definitely talk to you about the pros and the cons of that, but I'm going to fully support you if that is going to be a way for you to alleviate some pressure. As well, that's really going to be our approach during this time because it's really unprecedented. If this was a different circumstance, I don't know if I'd recommend that. But because this is a very huge shift for all of us, we're going to first take a look at your stressors and your financial landscape, and then we'll talk about the pros and cons, and then we'll take action.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We're in a time of acute need in an unprecedented way, so we kind of have to assess a little bit differently than we would normally. I think you're exactly right about that.
Yeah.
All right, we had a couple questions about the EIPs, the payments that everybody's heard a ton about in the news.
Yes.
And so thanks for so clearly explaining that process and how much that chart, I had not seen that before, was super helpful to look at. And a couple questions here. Do you know if somebody's direct deposit information has changed since they last filed their taxes? Should they just go to the IRS's website to provide new information?
Yeah, that's been coming up a lot for some of my clients. So my thing is pushing you directly to that website. It's like irs.gov, and I think it's like /coronavirus. It's definitely there. It's up and running. Do that. Absolutely.
Okay,
Huge call out. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. And then we have somebody who heard a rumor that these payments would have to be repaid. Have you heard anything about that? I have not.
I have not, and I've been reading that CARE Act as though it's like my Harry Potter, CARES Act, excuse me. So I don't think that's true at all. So great looking out for folks, but I do think this is no strings attached. Let's just get our economy back up and running type situation.
Yeah, I think that's my impression too. I would think at the very most, folks might have to claim it as income on next year's taxes, but the amount of that would be taxable would be very, very low, if anything.
Right.
So I think you're exactly right about that. And also, just to be super clear, if somebody's already filed their taxes for 2019, they don't have to file anything separately for this EIP. It'll just be direct deposited, or just,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Yep.
So you don't have to do an extra form unless you haven't done your taxes yet.
Or if your bank account information has changed, like we just called out.
Right.
So, yeah, and I can even say I had a client who's in Pennsylvania who filed their taxes in 2019 and had direct deposit for their refund and just received stimulus payment.
Oh, wow. All right. So they're already going out. So
Yep.
keep an eye on your bank account, folks.
Yes. Wake up and check every morning. I'm in that boat.
Yeah, me too. All righty. So I think those are the questions we've got for this information about assessing income. The only other thing I just want to call out is the information you shared about the SBA loan programs is so critical for small business owners right now to really understand the difference between those programs and how they might work well depending on your business situation. So we have more information about those. There's lots of information on the SBA's website. They've actually done a really great job of keeping it up to date and easy to navigate. So I would recommend just going to sba.gov to learn more about those.
Yes, thank you for calling that out, Meredith.
Yeah.
So we'll rock and roll with our next part.
Great.
So make a plan. We're going to be talking about tracking your spending a little bit more closely during this time, checking on accounts, as well as how to document. But something to think about is the goal is to minimize current disruption, mitigate any future burden, being strategic with income, credit, assets, and resources. But there is the dilemma that because no one really knows how long the shutdown or our social isolation will last for, or how long afterwards the financial toll will linger, you will need to consider your personal risk tolerance and your non-financial support networks in order to make decisions throughout this plan. So talking about tracking spending, I am a meticulous notebook, hand, pen, paper type tracker, but I do have a lot of clients who prefer apps. And I really think Mint.com is of high quality, as well as you need a budget and personal capital. Some require payment, and so I do want to call that out. Now might not be the time for that, but financial coaches with Trust Plus are here to help you make a budget and to talk about how to track your spending in a way that works for you during this time. And then the next step is going to be on checking your bank accounts, your insurance policies, and your public benefits. And maybe this weekend, one of the things that you could do, or tonight or after today's webinar, is get organized. Find all of the balances as well as the login accounts and money owed, and get all of that in order and in a manner that's easily accessible to you. Maybe it can be digitally on an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe it's handwritten in a notebook like I keep. And then let's talk about documentation, because this is really, really, really important. So making a plan for documenting the financial impact of the coronavirus is really critical. You have to document what you talk about with your landlords, your lenders, your employers. Create a paper trail. I email myself after every time I get on the phone with somebody and there's a decision made, and after I email myself with all those updates, I put that in my notebook when I have time. And I also do a pretty typical thing that we might do in the workplace as well. After I've gotten on the phone with a representative, I document on my end and have them take a note, and then I send a follow-up agreement or a follow-up email and be like, this is what we discussed and agreed to, just so that there's a paper trail. And keep receipts for COVID-related purchases. There's been some changes with the CARES Act in which menstrual products are now you can reimburse with your HSA. So that's really cool. And so keeping any kind of receipt is going to be critical. So plan making, super short, but what kind of questions are popping up for folks with that?
Yeah, we had a really good call out from one of our participants who's on the line about in those communications, making really sure that you're keeping them secure. So
yeah, yes.
Not, making sure, check the return address if you get something in the mail, check the actual email address, not just the name on the email. So that's something that we've been seeing a little bit is it'll say that the email is from, say, I don't know, Verizon or AT&T or the water company or whatever, customer service, but then the actual email address is like random guy at home at AOL.com. And
Yes,
that's not
right.
legitimate. We want to make sure that we're being really careful in our communications. I mean, all the time, but especially during this time.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a really good point. Thanks for pointing that out, Maureen. Anybody else have more questions about making a plan, getting organized, getting some of that documentation in order? I know that I would be interested to hear a little bit about if there's a way to break it down a little bit so it's not quite so daunting. If somebody has never had the opportunity to get kind of all their finances in order, would you recommend kind of biting off a little piece to maybe organize just one section, or how could we break it down and make it a little bit easier to get a handle on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am always in favor of bite-size, chunk chew steps. And so the first thing that I would say, especially considering my audience, is get any kind of documentation um, for businesses, as well as any, if you've had any employers, get all of that squared away first and foremost, because that is going to help in the immediate term for any kind of loans or grants that you might want to apply to, or unemployment. That's first. And then as time starts to grow and go on, and you're feeling like you got that squared away, start focusing on those needs, like mortgage as well as rent, and get that kind of documented and squared away. Then anything regarding bills, like any debts or utilities, that's going to be the next thing that comes up. But overarching out of all of that is going to be definitely, and I hate to say this, but God forbid you do have or have had COVID-19, kind of making sure all of that medical documentation is available to you, so that if you want to receive that pandemic unemployment assistance, that's going to be first and foremost. So keeping that in a safe, secured place first and foremost.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We had a question come in based on what you were talking about there with the mortgage or rent payments. Is this, you think, a good time to focus on modifying your loan for your mortgage, or maybe only focusing on forbearance, or is this like a refinance opportunity, kind of a broader change to that mortgage?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I would want to make sure that I take a look at, before I give a solid answer, just kind of your landscape of money coming in, savings availability, and credit. Um, so it might, like, I do think for some of my clients, this might be a good time for that. But I don't really want to say for certain, because we have to take a look at the big picture, make sure there's ample amount of savings, employment, and income streams are strong, as well as credit is on at the best possible place for it to be.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, great. So folks, anybody else have more questions, feel free to continue typing them in the chat box. We are receiving several questions here. So one follow-up on that mortgage question is, how would somebody kind of get all of that information together? Maybe obviously talking to a Trust Plus coach would be a helpful way to get
Yeah.
started, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about this at the end, but I would say right now would be a great time. If you haven't checked your credit reports in a while, definitely go to annualcreditreport.com. It's the only website guaranteed through the Federal Trade Commission to give you access to your credit reports for free. And you can get all three one time a year. So this might be a good time to check on that credit report.
Great advice. Annualcreditreport.com, right?
Yes, and I'll have that on a upcoming slide, so
great. Okay,
don't
cool.
stress. Yeah.
All right, great. And we've got just a couple questions that have come in about past sections. Do you want to take those now, or we could wait till the end to take questions about assessing expenses or income?
Well, let's go to the end, because I want to make sure I get everything in, and then
Sure.
we'll have that time.
Okay, sounds great.
So whomever called out the scams that are up and running and hitting us really hard, thank you so much, because I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from very random places saying the federal government will now delete your student loans. Please send me $500. And a lot of malicious text messages are coming through. What really scared me was like one really looked. I have a Walmart credit card. A Walmart text message came through, said I won a $100 gift card for shopping there. And I was like, oh my God. And then that was really scary. Not a really great source. That was really bad. Even I can get duped. And so we got to make sure we're checking and making sure that they are secured and actually who they say they are. A lot of phishing emails are going on right now, as well as, I have to call this out because I do have a lot of older clients. They've been receiving panicked emails and calls, as well as text messages that are saying that they're posing as my client's grandchildren and that they need to wire money immediately because they're stuck in the hospital. So keep an eye out for those. And so a few good practices that I want to highlight. If you see a scam, please be a hero and report that. Go to the Federal Trade Commission's website, ftc.gov, and submit it. I do it all the time because now is not the time, not today, for this kind of baloney. They also have a really fun scam bingo card on the Federal Trade Commission's website just to see what kind of stuff is happening. Like I spoke before, we're going to want to check our credit reports. Now might be a good time to lock them, freeze them. If you want to add a statement to your credit report explaining your situation, you can do that. Kind of think about a safe place and a proper way to store your logins and passwords, and always be checking when you're on a website that it's a secured website, but seeing that lock that shows up on the search bar. And I've set up alerts on my credit cards and bank accounts to monitor any suspicious transactions, because these scams have really freaked me out, even as a financial coach. So I want to call out another website for us. Trust Plus has done a really good job at getting resources together. So we're thinking about alternative transportation, mental health resources, free workouts, domestic violence considerations. So definitely check out mytrustplus.org later on today to see what other kind of resources are available to us. If you have any questions after today that we are not able to cover in the chat later, I want you to first and foremost, if you haven't checked your credit reports in a while, definitely visit annualcreditreport.com and request all three. Now is a good time to do that. That's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Now let me do the major call out. You have access, as being a participant on today's webinar, to have access to free financial coaching with Trust Plus. We're all bilingual. Most of my coaches are bilingual in Spanish. I do have one coach that is bilingual with French. And you're going to want to text webinar to 646-349-5959. And so I'm going to even just pause here for a bit if anybody wants to do that right now. Sign up for financial coaching. Awesome. And in true Trust Plus fashion, we're going to set for ourselves a take action today. So this is our way of setting an action step. So think about an action that you want to take, like automating monthly payments, review your credit report for mistakes, call your landlord, call Marcus by Goldman Sachs to see what kind of relief they can give for your personal loan. Set that take action and choose a date. And then set an accomplish by. So I'll start. I will set an alert on my city credit card that's for American Airlines, because I just remembered as I was talking on this webinar that I forgot to do that for that credit card. And I'm going to do this by Friday because I want to have a really relaxing weekend and not have anything carry over. And I will accomplish this by getting up early, and before my workday starts, I'm going to log in and do that. And if any of you feel like you want to share in the chat box any of your take action todays, please do so. I want to hear them. And so we've got a lot done. We got to know me, Trust Plus. We're staying positive and proactive because I can see in that chat box really good stuff. We've got some Q&A. We're remembering that we have this resource, texting webinar to 646-349-5959. What other questions came through? I'm ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. This is so great. I think my action will be to get my annual credit report from annualcreditreport.com. And I think I'll try to do it by Friday. I'll be with you on the quick uptick.
I know. I
going
like
through
that.
website.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Alrighty. So we did have a few more questions come in. Definitely folks can continue to write in and we'll get everything answered that we can today. The first thing I want to remind everybody is that we are recording this webinar right now. So we'll be sending a link to the recording to everyone who registered later on this afternoon. So you can go back and refer to this information later, and you can pause and make sure to read all of the fantastic information that Sarah's provided on the slides. And we hope that you can maybe share that information with other folks who you think would find some value in it. I know I've found a lot of value in this, so thanks. Let's see, we've had a couple more questions about the SBA loan offerings. Yeah. And I think that I actually can take a stab at answering some of them, Sarah, but let me know if I miss anything or you have other information as well. So the first question, Charlie's wondering if you can get a Paycheck Protection Program loan and also get an economic injury disaster loan. And it's a little bit complex because the economic injury disaster loan program was already established through the SBA for years and years back. I mean, historically, for instance, small businesses affected by Hurricane Katrina got economic injury disaster loans, that kind of thing. And so folks were applying for that program before the Paycheck Protection Program was even created by Congress. As Sarah said, the first of those loans started happening April 3rd. So if you had an EIDL loan application in before the Paycheck Protection Program came into effect, then you could technically sort of get both, but the Paycheck Protection loan would take into account the fact that you have an EIDL loan already. And so you can't get both sources of funding now that we're in a situation where both are available. But the great thing about SBA loan products is that there is no fee to apply, and you can turn down the financing once they give you the offer. So both of those things are really important to know. Also, for the point that Sarah was making about scammers, the SBA will not reach out to you saying, here's the information about our loans, please apply now for a fee. If somebody says that to you, claiming to be the SBA, they're not the SBA. Don't give them your information.
Nope.
So you can apply for free, get through the process, get your documents together, see what the loan offer is, and then assess which one is better for you. And then turn down what, if you decide that the Paycheck Protection Program is better because so much of it will be forgiven, then go with that for sure, because it'll be forgiven, obviously. But sometimes businesses have differing qualifications or differing needs, where the EIDL program that is not forgiven, but a very low rate, and 6 months of the payments are forgiven. And so you can kind of look at your options once you get the loan offer back and see which one applies. So that was a very long-winded way to say you can apply for all of them, you just can't receive all of them. And at least here at Accion, we are encouraging people to apply for as many sources of capital as you can, because you can make those decisions once you understand what options are available to you. Alrighty, so that was one question. And then we had another question about the those loans from the SBA about an ETA on disbursements. That's a very hard question to answer
Yes.
because there's so much in flux about the programs. The Paycheck Protection Program is a first come, first serve in terms of there's only 349 billion, which is so funny to say only 349 billion. But a lot of economists are projecting that money will run out, and there's conversations about whether Congress will replenish the funds. So, I mean, we're encouraging folks to get in touch with their lenders today. I mean, get the process started. And the faster you can get your documentation in order and get that submitted to your lender, the better off you're going to be. Alrighty, let's see. I wanted to ask a question, Sarah, about Trust Plus service, particularly, just to give a little bit more information about how this might work if somebody's interested in signing up for that financial coaching. Is there kind of a limit to how often you can talk, the kinds of financial topics you can talk about or ask questions about? What does that conversation with a financial coach look like?
Oh, that's such a great question. So first and foremost, we offer phone and Skype sessions. They typically last about a half an hour, and they can be as frequent as you need right now and forever. I have a couple of clients that I meet almost every other day right now because we're taking a lot of action. And then some folks that are good with a month out check-in. And, you know, I've had some folks that have reached a point in their life where a monthly check-in isn't necessary. So we're doing every 6 months. And then some folks who are on that plan of every 6 months are back in the throes of it, especially during this pandemic, and are back to meeting weekly or bi-weekly. So there's no limit. And this is really, because we're a nonprofit, we don't care about anything else but your financial success. So we're going to be doing whatever you need right now. So there's that. What else is important? Yes, there's some limits to what we can talk about. So we are not, we don't have any kind of licensure for investment advice. And, you know, some folks may be wondering a little bit about the stock market right now. So we can talk about it in general terms, but we're never going to be able to give that investment advice. So that's the one big caveat that I want to definitely highlight. But we do have a great network of resources to connect you with in terms of investment advice, as well as anything that might require any specialization. So think if foreclosure might be something, we'll want to connect you with a HUD certified housing counselor in your community. A lot of these folks are doing online intakes, so that's really cool. As well as, you know, there might be stuff in your life that's a legal issue, and we'll want to connect you with the best possible legal resources. We'll always start with a legal aid in your community and see what they have to offer. Especially if you get a judgment or anything like that, we want to make sure that you have the best access to services and referrals. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And just to clarify, someone asked if there's a special offer or at least free to start. And this is free to start and end and all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. This is free forever. And this is the time that we wanted to get on and do a webinar and talk about that because we're really here to support you. So please come, we're free, lifetime, whatever you need, we're here.
Excellent. I think that's a really great place to wrap up. We really appreciate your time, Sarah, for helping us think through these really important financial questions and sorting through. I think it can feel overwhelming anytime, but especially now. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through and make it a little bit easier to get started on managing and getting some of our finances in order. Thanks everybody for joining as well, for taking the time to invest a little bit in your financial health with us today. And stay on your email for the webinar recording that I'll send out, and more information to come in a few days about additional webinars. We'll continue to be running this series to help you get through this time.
Thanks all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.